There I was, prowling the outside one day, catting my way along a stone wall, taking a shortcut to avoid the crowds, when I passed a building covered in leafy vines. And because of all the greenery, I suddenly got the idea this place might have park critters inside, maybe some flappers at least. And who knows, I thought, it could even have the elusive flat flapper nest, full of plump eggs, which feline logic tells us has to be indoors somewhere, though I've never found the slightest trace of one. See, the hindwalkers just have too many eggs in their flats for them to have been snatched from ducks and tree birds around here. The amount of eggshells in bins gives you some idea of the number they're getting their greedy, spidery paws on. When I was really young, I actually thought the hindwalkers might be laying these themselves inside their buildings. But I didn't really understand the difference between the furred and the feathered back then, or how big their bald kittens actually were, far too big to be shelled. As time went by, I decided the only explanation for all these eggs is that people are keeping some type of flat flappers behind closed doors, laying eggs but keeping very quiet so no other critters can detect them. There's no way they're kept on the high rooftops or we'd see them fly back and forth. When I came across the gray cartons filled with eggs on inside countertops, looking like great big wasp nests with the compartments, I was convinced those must be it, the flat flapper nests, and that the secretive birds made them by regurgitating paper bags. But once after lapping a yolk or three, I flipped the container closed so the other eggs would stay warm and hatch into chicks sooner. And guess what I saw? Porkskin letters on top like you find on the street signs. True, flappers can make some elaborate nests out there, you have to give them that, but there's no way they've learned how to paint letters on, even crows. It was clear these couldn't be the real thing, and I was back to square one, which is where I've been stuck ever since. So at this leafy building then, I found a double window at leap level with one door eased open. Alas, I could already see from the wall it was just a big old den room with a white sofa in the middle, a carved desk to the right, and bookshelves behind. It didn't look like much of a park in there, and I couldn't smell any finger food either. But I hopped to the sill just to scan for possible flat flapper locations before I left, and then I caught a strong whiff of feathers, warm feathers at that. I couldn't believe my eyes when I spotted a big bird sitting on a wooden stand over to the right, in the near corner of the room. Although it vaguely reminded me of some flappers from Pet Shop Lane, I'd never seen one quite like this before. It was emerald green like a jewel on a porkskin finger ring, with a white face and a black beak so massive it looked like one of those tools people use to prune roses. That's probably why it wasn't in a cage, because it would cut itself out in no time. This weird flapper must have been attracted to the leafy building, just as I thought, then trapped by the hindwalkers. But could this even be the elusive flat flapper I'd been looking for? The thought did cross my mind, but then kept on flying. This beak face almost certainly wasn't the real thing, I quickly realized, since it wasn't concealed at all and had no nest in sight. So at that point I crouched down and began planning my attack, but as I lifted a paw to creep in, the door opened and I reeled back. I saw a woman enter, marmalade head fur and a green dress hide she must have picked to copy the flapper's feathercoat. And when she went over to the bird, it didn't fly away, but actually hopped onto her arm. That's when I noticed the bird had a leash around its leg, attached to the bottom of the stand. "How's my magnificent Mervyn?" said this woman to the bird. That might not seem too strange, as people will talk to anything, even the night air sometimes. But you won't believe this. The bloody bird started talking right back in people speak. A whole string of words. "That'll be 2 crackers, said this bird. I almost fell off the building without sticking the landing. Sure, I'd seen crows make a mew or two, even caw a creepy hello, but this was something else. Hindwalkers make the weirdest sounds in town and ramble them together like nobody else. And I'd never seen a critter get this close. The woman nodded and fed 2 crackers to him. Then she put Mervyn back on the stand and left the room, shutting the door behind. I now slipped through the swung window and dropped silently onto the floor. Mervyn spotted me though and made some nervous croaks. For a moment, I thought I wouldn't mind setting him onto the crows with that rose pruner on his face, since their spines are even thinner than rose stems when you strip the meat, and it should be quite simple to snip the cawtops right off. And I also thought maybe he'd come in handy opening some of the sealed tins I come across, which are pretty much fang-proof. But I had immediate belly concerns which were far more important. So I wasted no time, charged and leaped, claws lashing. The green bird dodged with a flurry of wings, as flappers will. But I managed to swipe the leash and drag him down. He crashed to the ground where four-leggers lurk and the flightless rule. And I was upon him. Claws yanked, jaws sank, and it was over. To spare you the grisly details, the area was soon strewn with green feathers and a fresh meat platter. And this feline had his fill. If you're curious about the flavor, it tasted like a cross between pigeon, crow, and crackers, but closest to crow, oddly enough. Then as I exited the leafy building and made my way home, I became quite wary all of a sudden. You wouldn't believe how I was scanning the skies, getting the idea a green flock had witnessed the hunt through the window and would come for me in revenge, just like the murky scourge. But I didn't see any green wings up there, which was good and bad. Good because I wasn't in the mood for a mobbing or a mass can opening of my cranium, but bad because they were certainly tasty birds and I wouldn't have minded swiping another few. As it turns out, I was back at the scene of the stray strike a few days later. This time the window doors were closed, but when I jumped to the sill to check within, I tried prying one open with my lucky white paw. And I don't call it a lucky paw for nothing. That window door swung. Seemed the hindwalkers had left it unlatched, thinking no backstreet bandits could work their contraptions out. I admit the motorcar still has me stumped, but for a four-legger, I'm practically a master of door and window operation. Again, I slipped in to snoop around. The feathers had been cleaned up, but I thought there might just be some bird leftovers they missed, or even other flappers, considering the leafiness of the place and the fact birds like to flock. And I was still holding out a little hope for a flat flapper nest, actually, since due to obvious distractions the first visit, I hadn't done a thorough hunt. But I didn't have much luck with any of it and was actually quite frustrated, because if I still couldn't find any flat flapper nests in a building this leafy, about as close to a tree as you can get, then what the hell? Well, before heading off, I ended up hopping onto the white sofa to do a final general morsel search in the crannies and behind the loose black pillows propped there, even just to dig up a lost salty cracker for my trouble. And holy cat gods above, that was one fine piece of furniture. I mean, I love my tartan sofa back home, don't get me wrong, but this was covered in a firmer fabric that had just the perfect amount of give, not too soft and not too firm. And the whole thing had far less mold and mites. It was lacking millipedes and a side saucer, so my sofa still had advantages for sure, but this one was extra special. Then as I was clawing that firm fabric and checking the color more closely, I started wondering. This wasn't some false hide like my sofa. It was real hide, furless but real. It had grown on some beast bones and then been torn off. Did they make this by sewing together dead pork skins? People make all kinds of things with dead animals, so it wasn't out of the question. Suddenly, the sofa started giving me the creeps somehow. I didn't want it to start hind walking around the room on its little stumpy feet while I was trying to nap, then invite mutts to jump on its lap. But I gave it a thorough snout inspection and the sofa skin didn't smell like pork skin at all deep down. And I'd sniffed those furless hands right up close many a time. So what type of critter they'd made this from, I couldn't exactly say. It was hard to even get an accurate sniff with the soup of pungent scents they'd soaked in during the making. But of all the living animals round here, it probably smelled closest to horse, though my snout wasn't convinced. I've mentioned how there's a part of town where a bunch of big mystery beasts are running around getting hunted for Carl's shop, so it could actually be one of those, if you want my best guess. And if you really put me on the spot and managed to evade my blades enough to keep me there, I'd say the critter was a beef rather than a lamb chop. But whatever the thing was, it definitely made great sofas, even if the sofa makers should have left the fur on the hide in my opinion, at least on the main cushions. At that point, with the place to myself and no hindwalker noise in nearby rooms, I decided I'd have a little lie down, just to properly test the beast hide sofa on the off chance I did end up with one of my own someday. And with the warmth in that building den, it was cozier than a sun-soaked step.
As I was musing about the possibility of someone dumping one of these things in my alley, running out of den space when their pram kittens grew up or something, I went and fell asleep and found myself in a very nice dream. It was about how that leash the emerald bird wore became a new fad in town and all the bird residents were forced to wear them, including outsiders.
This meant you had all the crows tied to their canopy comforts, unable to escape to perform their evil deeds. But it also meant there were flocks of pigeons tied to balconies and lampposts and park benches. And it was so convenient how they couldn't fly away, and how I could just tug the lines when I was hungry. Then, just as I was reeling in a great pudgy pigeon on a leash, I got woken by the sound of the door opening, and I didn't twitch an itch.
In came this man in a suit hide, with brown swept head fur patched white at the temples, carrying a bag and a special stick with a looped end woven with some kind of web. By the smell of him, he was back from an egg sandwich lunch break, which apparently I'd slept all the way through. Reckless move, I know. But unless you've spent your life grinding your bones on stone-cold cobbles, you have no idea how tempting it is to indulge in the warm, furnished comfort of the inside.
I yawned the last dream dregs out quick as I could, and considered the open window and the open door and which was better to bolt out of. I only had a moment to choose, just the blink of a bandit's urgent eye. And I decided window until the man walked over and latched it shut, at which point I decided door, until the green-hided woman came and blocked the doorway.
"Miss Potts has arrived," she said. "Send her in," said the man.
And in the split second between the woman closing the door and the man leaving the window, I slunk back behind the two big pillows leaning against the sofa arm, stuffed my tail into the back of the seat and hid there dead still.
Incredible escape plan, I know, but better than jumping snout first into glass or hardwood planks.
Moments later, that door opened and in walked a young woman with dark head fur and a black dress hide with white spots. And if that was some attempt to camouflage with the evening lights around here, it's pretty optimistic to say the least. She talked with the man for a little. I wasn't paying attention because I was trying to hatch that escape plan of mine, but I might as well have been a flapper trying to hatch an old snail shell up a tree. The best I could come up with was to slip into the woman's big handbag and smuggle myself out.
But my plotting of that mad little scheme was interrupted as the porkskin pack moved over to the sofa. The woman chose my end, sitting up straight luckily, so she didn't press against me. And the man sat beside her. Then the green-hided woman soon came back in and plunked down a rattling tray on the table. And my ears pricked not too far because you know the situation.
In combination with a hefty sniff, I detected 2 cups of Herbie steaming liquid. There was also a plate of cream-loaded cake. And the jam filling? Raspberry. No eyes needed. Neat trick, huh?
When the service had scrammed again, I snuck some copper eye confirmation and saw I was spot on except as far as the cake went. I was actually dealing with 2 cream-bursting scones. But the jam was on the mark still.
Now, even if it was 1 alley stalker versus 3 hindwalkers, and that door led straight to the outside, I wouldn't hesitate to go for the straight-out scratch and snatch with a dashing exit when that door opened again. But I didn't like my chances against 3 full-grown hindwalkers in a locked-up lair of their making. So I decided to wait for the room to clear and the window to unlatch, if I could stay undetected that long. But my bad luck continued when the young spotted woman reached for her cup and heaved back into the pillows, practically fusing me to the sofa. It knocked a week's worth of yawns right out, and I had to clench my mouth closed so my insides didn't follow.
Then she started elbowing the pillows to remove the lump, which happened to be solid cat stuff. And her bony, furless elbow was like the vicious point of an umbrella, landing blow after blow on my head.
Now one sunk straight into the eye socket. I was not only suffocating to death, but getting blinded in the process.
I had no choice but to burst out of there, and that I did, leaping sideways right over the armrest and darting behind the sofa. Sure, I was blowing my cover, but I wasn't going to stay there until both eyes were pounded out of their sockets and rolling around my skull box.
The spotted woman jumped up with fright, then stumbled and crashed the loaded tray right off the table, which splattered the floor. She's running out, I thought, here's my chance. But then the door shot open with the green-hided woman blocking the exit again, this time wondering what all the commotion was. And she saw me before I could find cover. Suddenly everybody was pointing and trying to guess my name. Scram Rat Scrounger. Get ya grime bag. That was new at least. But it's Morty, actually. Or Mort for short if you've got a butcher shop to run.
It must be the one that ate my bird, said the man. Don't let him get away, yelled the green-hided woman, then gave my name one last go. Catchin, kill the wicked beast.
Not even close.
I ran straight for the doorway, hoping to beat her out, but she slammed it shut in time. Then I skidded around to the right, jumped on the desk, and took a flying leap at the bookcase. I was just aiming to get to high ground. That sound strategy in a Mutt ambush, though slightly less effective against Mutt's best friend. Still, options were thin.
I hit the case about 2 shelves from the top and a few books came flying out. But I managed to cling on and climb up to the frame roof, where I had some room to maneuver on the bare wood.
From there, I just gave them all the most murderous snarl I could think of. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't.
Unfortunately, I wasn't getting too much echo in that room like I might in a tunnel or alley, so it wasn't the biggest sound, and together with the lack of shadow and fog, I couldn't quite achieve the menacing moment I needed. So there we were in a deadly standoff. Together, they outnumbered me 3-1. But I reminded myself I still outnumbered them 4 fangs to none and had a 6 life advantage overall.
These people were looking to avenge Mervyn, I realized, looking for someone to take the fall.
It's true I was the culprit, but they didn't know that for sure. I could have just been a poor kitty looking for a home. And that really infuriated me, the injustice of it all. Grabbing his webbed stick, the man ran over to the bookcase and tried to swipe me off the top shelf, or maybe even stick me to it like a bug in Spinster's web. But I saw this coming and pressed myself back against the wall just out of reach, as the strikes clanged back and forth over the case. And all he slashed down was dust and varnish.
Next thing I know, a ball thuds off the wall nearby, thrown by the green-hided woman.
You heartless little horror, she yelled. I was teaching him 8 new words a week, and some watercolor.
She now took the sports bag in hand and dumped the contents.
Get him down and we can trap him in here, she said.
Then she tossed the spotted woman a towel to help net me. Mervyn had more talent than you'll ever have, you scrappy street-crawling parasite, she cried.
Someone seemed upset I was better at life than this flapper friend of hers. Not just outside life, but apparently inside too. Even though I wasn't even a proper part-timer there, let alone a fur cushion. Well, I work hard for my survival. Even those rare days it's a walk in the park, I'm still outnumbered an entire soot-winged flock to 1.
At this point, I could smell the predatory rage in them. But they just couldn't get me down. So now they changed tactics.
The woman flipped a toppled plate, dabbed some cream on it, then started cooing to me, chiming the dish with a spoon like it was Din Din's at Housecat Manor. "Come on down, kitty," she said. "We're not angry anymore. Here, sweetheart, you must be hungry." "Oh no you don't, hindwalker hag," I thought. "We're not playing spoil the skinny stray now." She hid the bag behind her with the other hand as if that was going to make me shoot down from my perch like a pigeon after a seed pile. While I was distracted and looking over the edge, the man went for a surprise strike, hoping to clip me leaning too far, but the only one he caught napping was the spotted woman, hammering her with his wide backswing and ruining his own assault.
She fell over squealing, then got up, opened the door and staggered out, holding her face in agony. One hindwalker down, even though it was back on shaky legs. But I still had two to go, the most dangerous of the pack.
And as they apologized to their victim, I looked over to the open door, wondering how I was going to get there from the bookcase. It's where those gargoylean wings would come in handy, isn't it? Any cat gods listening up there? This is why we need them. I now swung a paw down and hooked some books right out of the case, thudding them onto the floor like some hindwalker choosing a light read for the leaf-strewn park bench, and hoping my enemies might come to catch or restack them and give me a chance to fly by. But they held their position, not taking their eyes off me, and looking only more murderous. Some say attack is the best form of defense. I don't think that's necessarily something to live by, because if you're striving to outgnash a guard dog duo or outscreech a skidding motor car, you won't be living for long. But when your back is to the wall, sometimes attack is your only option, particularly if the wall joins a ceiling and there's no cat leaping over it. I wasn't getting through the windows either. I couldn't live on this bookcase forever. And these crazed hindwalkers weren't leaving until they had me zipped up in that bag. The sole escape route was through the swung door, and that would be closed again any instant. It was simple survival logic in the end. The only way out was to carve my own exit. I leaped off the bookcase, straight over the woman and landed square on the suit-hided chest of the man, which gripped like a doormat. In one furious rush, I gave him some rat-a-tat-tat on the temples with my claw-drawn clubs, just to see if anyone was home, and an extra ear hole in case he couldn't hear me. Turns out he was definitely home, and spun around yelping for his life like I was some kind of manhunter. I mean, I barely drew enough blood for lick snacks, it was ridiculous. As the man stumbled into his desk, I dismounted my prey and scrambled to the open door. At the edge of the tray pileup lay another scone, still loaded with cream, and as I shot past, I snatched it up for the trip home. Out the door, I turned right past the wounded spotted woman. Wrong guess. It was a dead end a few strides down, and I plowed into a pot plant, scuttling it as I bounced off like a hurled ball and shot back the other way, heading for a room at the end of the passage. It was the only option, with the few doors along the way being shut tight and leading deeper into the building den regardless. Though one definitely hid morsels, I can tell you. Those hindwalkers were hot on my tail like bark beasts onto a roll-away ham, still wielding the webbed stick and bag. And the man had blood dribbling down his face like he'd just lost a catfight. Technically, they were hindrunners now. And despite being a quirky trick, that method is even less effective than their wonky walk, and most four-leggers can easily outstride them. But it does offer one annoying advantage, keeping their forelimbs free. And so misfortune was quickly back on the menu for me. As I looked back, I saw the man sling the stick my way, and it spun like a fan, skimming the carpet. I swerved hard, but the handle took the back legs out from under me, and I was just lucky the loop didn't web my paw pads. I'm telling you, this hindwalker had his eye in now, and I regretted not scratching it out when I had the chance. But you want to keep this gritty kitty down, you better pave me in the cobbles, then raise a 9-story brick den on top. Up I scrambled, and snatched back the scone which had luckily landed cream side up and only lost a tongueful of goodness, and I accelerated back to stray speed. I had good distance on them as I reached the room at the corridor's end. There was a desk on the right, a door straight ahead, and double window to the left. But I knew my limits. I had little chance with a sealed door, though swinging windows could be outsmarted if loose. So I jumped onto the sill and went to work with frantic paws, shoving and pounding and ramming my head into the frame for good measure. Then on the off chance these swung inwards, I scraped desperately at the crack with every claw in my sockets to pry a window door open. But it was hopeless either way. A latch was fastening them tight. The bounding steps were only moments away now. I licked my white sock for good luck and clawed at the latch from every angle, but I'd used up its luck for the day and the latch held firm. These things are designed for hindwalker hands alone. I wouldn't go so far as saying I'd have traded in that trusty kill paw for a clawless porkskin one right about then, just to get that window open, since I'd then have to walk around with that silly little spidery hand stuck on for life. But in the stress of the moment, it did cross my mind. Then suddenly the door opened and another suit-hided man, this one with a stick, walked in and saw me, then tipped his hat. "Kitty wants to go out, does he?" he said.
Kitty bloody well did. He'd had enough of the inside for the day, actually the month too, and maybe the one after that depending on morsel supplies. And I yowed urgently.
I heard my pursuers shouting in protest, but it was too late. The man strode over, unlatched and swung open the windows, and I gave a final look back just in time to see the sports bag slung right at me in desperation. But I was already leaping out before it slapped harmlessly through the frame and ditched on the ground.
Did she think the bag was going to swallow me mid-air then zip itself up? We've all tried a throwaway pounce here and there, just in case it comes off, but that was the worst I've ever seen. Back on the outside, I was almost in the clear, though not quite. As I slipped away, carrying that cream scone, I got some envious looks from hounds and hindwalkers both. So I didn't risk lapping my spoils until I made it to Pet Shop Lane, the closest safe zone. And when I arrived and got stuck in, tucked against the wall across from the window, because it wasn't a proper sit-and-stare sanctuary there until after dark, I reviewed that last hunt a little, which I often like to do.
This time I was mostly the hunted, despite some brief manhunting of my own, but the prey perspective can be quite useful. The mistake my hunters made was not sending a hindwalker out the window the moment they saw me darting out the door. It wouldn't have guaranteed a catch, but if one pack member had been waiting right under my escape window, then I may well have landed straight in the bag. But they'd really made a mess of their own hunt, and were left to lick their wounds, and their cream off the carpet, which must be quite awkward with that weird upright head.
Still, I wouldn't call all that some lucky escape of mine from the lair of the emerald treasure, because you can see there was a fair bit of skill involved too. A purring fur cushion wouldn't even have escaped the sofa with their eyeballs undented, let alone a bookcase under siege, 2 sealed rooms and an armed corridor chase. But probably the main lesson to learn here is no matter how treasure-laden an indoor abode is, the inside is just tailor-made for ambushes.
I'm telling you, it's why they make the walls so close, the whole interior like a maze, and put tricky locks and latches on all the escape hatches. If you want to be a room raider who lives to see the outside again, you better not underestimate the hindwalker's home habitat.